My name is the Secretary General of the Atlanta Korean American Committee Against Asian Hate. And thank you very much for joining us to commemorate the March 16th Atlanta shooting victims and reflect on AAPI's moving forward against Asian hate during the pandemic. Today, March 16th last year, the AAPI community across the country was shocked and frightened by the massacre that killed 6 Asian women among 8 innocent people. The first generation Korean Americans formed the Atlanta Korean American Committee Against Asian Hate on March 17th, the next day of the shooting, to fight against the rise of Asian hate. We held several community events such as Stop Asian Hate Vigil and community conversation events on why we need to include Asian American history in K-12 curriculum. We connected with other AAPIs, Black, Brown, and Hispanic communities that suffer from the same racial discrimination and systemic racism through collaborative organizing. We stood in solidarity to stop racial hate crime and misogyny and xenophobia. By making a voice to stop Asian hate and building a coalition, the AAPI community has transformed from quiet to loud and invisible to visible. We do see many elected officials' participation today from all levels of government entities. It is just a snapshot of how our community has changed from disconnection to connection. We invited most of the same speakers last year for various events, and they wanted to revisit the Korean American community to show their care, friendship, solidarity, and unity. Thank you. Kaksmin, the Buddhist monk from the Buddha Temple.
초기안은 기쁨 토일 최고야 사회자 색불이공 물리사 색득이공 공주지세 수상행 행여 부여체 사리자 시대와 공상물 생불멸 물과부장 물정물 감시구 공정 설신은 무색 성향미 초건무한 일내제 노이시계 영음의 명예내제 문노 사용이고 사진 거짓멸도 형미력인 무소유고 고래 살터에 반여 바람일다 구심의 무가의 검을 공허활래야 천주몽상금 열반 삼비리부라 한야라 일라 그간욕따로 삼여승부 거제완야라 일라 시대 전여 시대 병유 신무상중 최마당금 저희는 자르지 진실으로 설한영으로 일도 작살과 알라대 한대 불령 하라 성하대 무이제 사과 안돼 안돼 발라안돼 하라 성하대 무이제 사과 안돼 하라제 회라 성하대 무이제 사과 Stop crying, it is hard. 발설에 커맨는 만수 말체 섹스 진엘랑 처슈링 애슈링 강명진을 오해만모 가바에로 찬노마하느라 만예 파데마 서로 프로바이드 타이어우문만모가 하에로 찬나마하느라 만예 팔등 바에라 프라바이드 타이어우문만모가 하에로 찬나마하느라 만예 팔등 모습은 공덕 부가와의 지하등 여중생 상생응나구 동견령 두개구
Thank you very much, 총각스님, for this chant and sermon. We're going to have a moment of silence for the 8 victims of the Atlanta shooting. Thank you. You do see the 8 candles on your table that represent 8 victims of the Atlanta shooting. It is Korean tradition to dedicate the flowers to the victims. So we prepare the tables and the speakers. Please come forward and dedicate one flower, one by one. And he will arrange the orders. Kim Baek-gyu of the Atlanta Korean American Committee Against Asian Hate for the welcome remarks.
Thank you, everyone, for attending the one-year anniversary of commemoration of the fallen victims from the senseless shooting spree that occurred at 3 separate spots in the metropolitan area of Atlanta. As you know, our Asian American community lost 6 very precious lives from this horrible incident. Whether we consider this incident an anti-Asian sentiment or not, we as an Asian American community need to work together to promote ourselves to gain positive and impactful recognition among other communities. At the same time, we do need to embrace and support each other within our Asian American community. By working together to make this a priority, I hope our future generations don't encounter this kind of tragic and painful incidents. Thank you all again for attending this one-year commemoration service and supporting our Asian American community. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Consul General of the Republic of Korea in Atlanta, Yoon-Chu Park.
I'm Consul General Yoon-Chu Park of Korean Consulate in Atlanta. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the Atlanta Korean American Committee Against Asian Hate for hosting this meaningful event. My appreciation also goes to U.S. Congresswoman Carolyn Bozo, Georgia Senator, Georgia Representative Sam Park, and Georgia Representative Pedro Martin, and many other distinguished guests for joining us here today. Before I begin, I would like to give my deepest condolences to victims and their bereaved families who lost their loved ones because of these horrific shootings in Atlanta on March 16, 2021. Following the spread of the COVID-19, there has been a dramatic increase in the hate crimes and violence against the Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders throughout the United States. The United States is a nation built by immigrants that cherishes diversity and freedom as founding principles, which has enormously contributed to its growth and success. Hate crimes motivated by the race or ethnicity pose a dire threat to core beliefs of this nation. We also need to be aware that increased hate crimes harms the international reputation of the United States and threatens national solidarity. We need to expand public education campaigns aimed at raising awareness of hate crimes to prevent and address these issues. Korean Consulate also recognizes the magnitude of these hate crimes in our communities. will continue to work closely together with the U.S. government to effectively deter hate crimes and secure Koreans residing in the United States. Thank you. Just I want to say in the Korean language also. 안녕하십니까. 주 애틀랜타 총영사관의 박일주 총영사입니다. 이렇게 뜻깊은 행사를 마련해 주신 아시아 증오범죄방지위원회 관계자 여러분, 참석해 주신 많은 시민들께 깊은 감사 인사를 드립니다. 먼저 작년 3월 16일 애틀랜타 총격사건으로 희생된 희생자와 유가족분들께 깊은 애도와 위로의 말씀을 전합니다. 최근 미국 전역에서 아시아를 향한 범죄가 지속적으로 발생하고 있습니다. 특정 인종을 향한 범죄는 역사적으로 다양성을 기반으로 하는 미국 사회의 근간을 장식하는 무서운 병입니다. 미국은 많은 이민자로 구성된 나라로 다양한 인종이 함께하면서 자유와 다양성을 중심으로 큰 힘을 발휘한 나라이기 때문입니다. 한편 증오범죄는 미국 국내뿐만 아니라 국제사회에서의 미국의 위상에도 영향을 미치게 된다는 점을 잊어서는 안 됩니다. 미국 시민들이 증오범죄의 심각성을 인지하여 함께 문제를 해결할 수 있도록 적극적으로 홍보하고 교육해야 합니다. 총영사관도 코로나 사태 이후 증가하는 증오범죄의 심각성을 인지하고 해외에 체류하는 한국인들과 동포들의 안전을 확보하기 위해 미국 정부와 긴밀히 협력하여 대응방을 마련하는 등 최선의 노력을 다하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Consul General. And I'd like to introduce President Simon Lee of the Korean American Association of Greater Atlanta.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. All of us gathered here today to honor these innocent people who were killed last year during mass shootings. Let's remember them by name: Xiaojie Ten, Naomi Hong, Terani Gonzalez, Paul, Andrea Michelle. They was killed during a first attack on young Asian spa northeast of Atlanta. Sunjong Park, Hyunjong Brand, Sunja Kim were killed on the second attack on Gold Spa in Atlanta. Young Yu was killed across the street in the third and final attack on Aromatherapy Spa. These 8 people, 6 of them Asian women, including 4 Korean women, were killed in this shooting by single gunmen at the spa across Atlanta area. The shooting sent shockwaves throughout the country, especially in our Asian community, which has been nearing from peak surge in the recent violence that coincide with the start of the coronavirus pandemic 2 years ago.
From President Biden, March 16, 2022, from the White House, Washington, D.C. 1 year ago today, 8 people, 6 of them women of Asian descent, were tragically killed by a gunman who attacked 3 Asian-run businesses. These horrific murders shook communities across America and underscored how far we have to go in this country to fight racism, misogyny, and all forms of hate, and the epidemic of gun violence that enables these extremities. In the aftermath of this senseless death, the Vice President and I traveled to Atlanta to meet with leaders of the Asian American community. We heard about the terror and anguish that too many Asian Americans have felt since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, when anti-Asian xenophobia, harassment, and violence skyrocketed to alarming levels. Grandparents afraid of leaving their homes, small business owners targeted and gunned down. Families living in fear for their lives just walking down the street in America. was a stark reminder that anti-Asian violence and discrimination have deep roots in our nation, with Asian American women experience the compounded harm of being targeted on account of their race as well as their gender. This tragedy is also yet another reminder of the gun violence epidemic. My administration has taken more executive action to reduce gun violence than any other administration in its first year. But there is more to do, and Congress must end. On this sober anniversary, my administration remains fully committed to advancing safety, inclusion, and belonging for all Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, especially the women and girls who disproportionately bear the burden of hate, and to reducing the gun violence that terrorizes our communities. Together, we must build a future where no one fears violence. From President Biden. This time, I would like to introduce the State Director from the Office of U.S. Senator John Asa, Chandra Harris.
Good evening. 1 year ago, our community was torn apart by violence that took the lives of 8 of our brothers and sisters. Senator Ossoff wishes that he could be with you this evening, but he wants to send his deepest love and support for the victims' families and for the entire Asian American community across Georgia. Now we'll hear a video remarks from Senator Ossoff.
Stand steadfastly with the Asian American community in Georgia in mutual defense and united against bigotry and hatred. We are all of us human beings, and united, we grieve alongside the loved ones, colleagues, friends, and neighbors of those who were killed. We must build a state, a nation, and a world where no one lives in fear because of who we are, or where we or our families come from. A state, a nation, and a world built on love for and trust in our fellow human beings. Let us continue to build that world in honor of those we grieve and remember today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Martha Ribella, from the Office of U.S. Senator Rafael Warnock. She's the Outreach Director.
Exactly 1 year ago today, our community suffered immense pain from the loss of members of our beloved community. It is tragic that we experience this kind of violence yet again. Unfortunately, Senator Warnock could not be here today, but we will watch a video on his behalf.
Thank you.
The nation was shocked by the hateful violence that occurred in metropolitan Atlanta on March 16th, 2021. 8 precious lives were taken from us that day. 8 people with their own lives, their own loved ones. 8 people who were loved by their families, their friends, their children, and their spouses. 8 people with their own successes and struggles, hopes, and dreams. My heart aches for these Georgians who were the victims of unconscionable, senseless hate. This unspeakable violence was visited largely upon the Asian American community, and especially on women of Asian descent. And it should remind all of us of our sacred duty to stay committed to a peace, an active peace, that prevents these kinds of tragedies from happening in the first place. As a black man who represents Georgia in the Senate, I am all too familiar with the hate that can stir in our country and how that misplaced anger can hurt whole communities. I wanted to say to my AAPI sisters and brothers that I see you, and more importantly, I will continue to stand with you. That's why I fought to pass the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act and get it signed into law, directing more resources to ensure our communities feel safe from hate and crime its ugly head. This tragedy ought to remind us all that we all have a stake in each other's well-being. Dr. King said, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And so let us work in memory of him to create what he called the beloved community, where everybody, no matter their skin color, ethnicity, or religious background, can live a satisfying life without fear of facing prejudice and hate. Keep the faith and keep looking up.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to welcome U.S. Congresswoman Caroline Boulder. She stood with us when we were suffering from the Asian hate during the pandemic period.
Good evening. I'm Carolyn Bordeaux, Congresswoman from Georgia's 7th Congressional District. Thank you to Michelle Kang and the Atlanta Korean American Committee Against Hate for organizing this event this evening. Across our country, the Asian American community has felt deeply under attack. Over the past couple years, xenophobic political leaders used dangerous rhetoric to stir up hatred against many immigrant communities. Asian Americans in particular have been attacked and harassed because of misinformation and xenophobia that wrongly blame them for the COVID-19 pandemic. Like so many across our country, I watched in horror last year as the news broke of the murder of 8 innocent people, 6 of whom were women of Asian descent, and several of whom were immigrants. The victims of this attack included mothers and grandmothers, fathers and sons, teachers and veterans. These are lives that cannot be restored, leaving pain that cannot be forgotten. Today, we honor their memory. I want to take one moment to remember the George Floyd marches and how in Gwinnett, all of our communities stood together in that moment in solidarity with the Black community. It was Asian, it was Hispanic, it was white, it was Black, it was young, it was old, it was single, it was families. We all came together. And I also want to take a moment right now to recognize the diversity of the communities standing up and standing in solidarity with the Asian American community and with the Korean community in this moment. And I want everyone in the Asian American community, in the Korean community, to know that when this happens, you are not alone. We are with you. Georgia's 7th District is home to some of the largest Asian American communities in Georgia, and I have been deeply involved in passing legislation that addresses the rise in hate crimes. Last year, I worked with Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus Chair Representative Judy Chu and other members of the Georgia delegation to introduce House Resolution 275, which condemned the horrific shootings that took place here in Atlanta 1 year ago today. I recently co-sponsored a resolution that commemorates the 1-year anniversary of the shooting by condemning the actions of the perpetrator, honoring the victims of this crime, and reaffirming the importance of addressing anti-Asian hate and the federal government's commitment to combating hate, bigotry, and violence against Asian Americans across this country. I have also co-sponsored and spoken on the House floor in favor of H.R. 1843, the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which was passed in both the House and the Senate with overwhelming bipartisan support and signed into law by President Biden. This legislation requires the Attorney General to expedite the review of alleged COVID-19 hate crimes and provide grants to state and local law enforcement agencies to improve the reporting of hate crimes data. Finally, I am a co-sponsor of a resolution that condemns all forms of anti-Asian sentiment as related to COVID-19. As we look ahead, it is my hope that these perpetrators of hate crimes are brought to justice and these measures reduce the number of hate crimes in our community. The heinous shootings in Georgia was a wake-up call to the public to the reality of the Asian American community and what they face each and every day. When one group of Americans is hurting, we are all hurting. Acts of violence like these demonstrate why we must always call out bigotry and hate whenever or wherever we see it. We must all speak out against it. We must all stand together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline Woman, Caroline Board.